What up? Mark just clapped. You might not have seen that on there. This is Robin Black YouTube channel, youtube.com/Robin Black. We talk about a lot of martial arts here. Pretty much 90% what we do. And we talk about martial arts. And we're going to talk about Kelvin Gastelum. We're going to talk about Jacare. These are two great combat sportsmen, martial artists. They will fight each other on May, 14th, something like that? May 14th. And in Brazil, no less. May 12th in Brazil. Cool fight. Cool beans of a fight. A lot of questions popping up here about Kelvin Gastelum's size. When it comes to true middleweights, Kelvin has no shot, was one. Now, for that reference, somebody, we'll talk around these aspects of this fight. For that reference, somebody may be bringing up Chris Weidman and how big he is. I'll tell you, that Kennedy's a big dude. That Kennedy dude, Tim Kennedy. Tim Kennedy's a big fucking dude. Did you see what Kelvin did to Tim Kennedy? Anybody? I was there. It was in Toronto. I was there. It was unbelievable. And that's going on, what's got to be 15 months ago now. January, February. Yes, I'm counting my hands. January, February. We're going on to 18 months ago, 17 months ago. So why does that matter? Because the type of skills that Kelvin is expressing. Hey, Iggy, what up? The type of skills Kelvin, by the way, YouTube is my friends on Periscope, at Robin Black MMA on Periscope and Instagram and Twitter. Kelvin is winning fights and winning moments like he did with Michael, with movement, with not being there and then being there. These are aspects of the game that Bruce Lee brought in the 70s. He did that by studying, among other things, by studying the highest level boxers, obsessing about boxing, and fencing, right? And the stop hit and aspects of fencing and boxing where you would draw somebody in and hit them in places where they're committed, not able to touch you, and then moving. And somebody said, called him a ghost. Yeah, sure. He wasn't there. Bisping through, he wasn't there, and then he was there and took Bisping out. Why did I mention 18 months? Because the Bisping one was that brilliant exchange. There was some other moments before it. But against Tim Kennedy, he did that from about halfway through round one until the end of it. And let me give a little respect to Tim Kennedy right now. That was a beating. And now there's an aspect to being able to say that, which allows us to appreciate the heart, guts, toughness, and resilience and like humanity. Just who he is, what type of man and human he is, to take that. Because Kelvin laid it on him, and he took it. But when there's 2.5 rounds of that, and then that's been his real focus. And there's stuff right here on this YouTube channel where we're hanging out with Kelvin, and I don't even remember what that city was, where we sat down with him. Dallas. And even that's a year ago now. That's, a year ago now. And he's talking about that aspect of the game. At the time, the flavor of the month was range management or distance manipulation or space, playing with space, ranges, however you want to talk about it. That was the flavor of how we described it now. And why do I phrase it that way? It's because understandings of things, relationships to knowledge, build on anything. If you're an expert on ice cream, you look back at what you knew about ice cream 5 years ago and you can't believe how little you knew compared to what you know now. That's what's been going on with Kelvin. Since Tim Kennedy, we saw a taste of it with the great Michael Bisping. Now we don't even know. That's what Jacare has to deal with. Why is that interesting? Well, Jacare has 3 first-round knockouts, and then there's a loss sandwiched in there somewhere. To Romero. And then there's 3 first-round finishes in around there. So that idea of going in there and just taking people out, that's a really That's a really interesting and beautiful aspect of martial arts. Now, I don't like to use this term. It's one that we can use to understand. I'll get away from it over time till the point that we'll never need to use it, hopefully. But they would refer to this in other arenas as the kill shot. Now, I'm phrasing it that way. I would never use that in a broadcast because I don't like the sound of that. I don't think that's accurate. But you understand what that means. That has always been an aspect of martial arts. Maybe there's a better way we can phrase that, the finishing shot, the moment that you end, the fight ending moment. That's a simply and concise way. But the fight ending moment, that's a real thing. That's martial arts. That is an aspect of martial arts. Can we create a scenario in which we can end it? And I know that sounds intuitively logical, that everybody's looking for it, but the art of that, the art of executing that level of perfection is in and of itself a skill that is separate from other skills. Jacare has been doing that. He's been doing that like crazy. And he'll look to do that with Kelvin. The issue is the trigger hit. That's okay. But again, trigger suggests a gun or something. I want to slowly move away from it. We're looking. This is art. This is not. And use any words you like. Don't let me. I'm not judging. Use any language you like. This language is a thing we can use for our own purposes. Shirt probably should have been a size bigger. Well, this is a small. That's what I got. So. But you wear your shirts how you like. How about that? Yeah, we're trying to get away from that idea but as I said, talk about however you like. It's your language to talk about the thing you enjoy the way you want to talk about it. But for me, that idea of being able to finish the fight instantaneously, that's a skill in of itself. But we saw Kelvin execute that skill against Mike. And again, he did it with that specialized detail that he has been working on focusing on as an important part of it. Now, he has appeared to be the middle. If you watched, I don't know if you did, but if you didn't, it's just back one on this channel. Ask Robin Black this week. Somebody asked me, is Khabib the grappling version of Stephen Thompson? I think it was my friend at Will Asia. And it is Khabib. And I said Khabib is the reverse Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson wants mastery of long distance to use his long-range weapons. Khabib wants the shortest of all range or no range. He fights at no range would be a nice way to put it. And I think Kelvin Gastelum's tried to develop that game of being the mid-range version of that, being right in the fire, which is somebody asked about Anderson Silva today. That was a big part of Anderson Silva's game. Being right in the fire, right in your grill, right there where it can happen. And then dangerous game to play. But it is a game of one-hit finishes. It's a game of shut it off. Because if you believe you can hit me with that left hook and you commit fully to it, and I hit you while you're in full commitment, this is where these, contest-ending moments are created. Awesome stuff. Sleep techniques, sure. Although those quitters can be hyperextension of limbs, there's all damage, pain, there's all kinds of things. But so what are the obvious? I'm going to get into going mid-range didn't serve him well against Weidman. Great point. So what do you got to do? So that's bring up a nice point here. Something failed. Didn't work. We lost. Mark and I were talking about this just as we were setting up. Cub Swanson against Frankie very recently had a really good game put together. Smart game. It was beautifully expressed. It was structurally sound. He had the right idea, and he lost the fight. Still the right idea. Done differently in a different moment. A couple different decisions. An adjustment in a different way. Some failure on the part of the other guy. Any of those things. And that's the same thing with Kelvin. But loss is important, man. These losses are important. Jacare has lost twice to Romero now. Oh, he lost to Robert Whittaker. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, Whittaker, man. Whittaker is something.
How's his
Yeah, yeah, that was. And why did Cub lose that fight? Cub had the right game plan, draw Frankie. Frankie had the right game plan against a guy who will draw you, don't go all the way in, and win in the moments. Frankie played a middle to outside, kind of from what Kelvin looks to do, out to Thompson, and tried to win those distances. And it's hard to win those, and it's hard to win them against Cub. And he did it. He did it for 3 rounds, and it was brilliant. You know why Cub lost that fight? Because Frankie was brilliant that night. That's the game. And why did Kelvin lose that fight? Because Chris was brilliant that night. And why did Jacare lose to Robert Whittaker? Because remember that? Robert Whittaker defending the ability when Jacare is tearing him to the ground, he's preventing that from happening, and then he's separating, he's getting drawn into grappling and then fully disengaging from it. That's legit. Robert Whittaker is legit. Of the fights I want to see, and this is not anything to do with who I'm cheering for or titles. I don't give a fuck about titles. I really don't. It's not my thing. I don't. I care about the martial arts contests. But Robert Whittaker against Kelvin Gastelum, love it. And I want to see Jacare again against Yoel Romero. Who's the champ? I don't care as much. But to get that, we have these other fights first. We have literally the opposite of those, right? We have Yoel Romero against Robert Whittaker, and we have Jacare against Kelvin. And so Jacare, we've seen 4 fights in the last few years. 3 of them executed excellently, and that was the end, and he was the champion. We didn't get 15 or 25 minutes to assess what he is, what he's doing, how he's put the whole thing together now. Yeah. Yeah, and he fought Kamosi twice in there. So we actually haven't gathered the full picture. But when people want to talk about fighting often, they're like, well, Jacare's ground, man. If he gets to the ground, he'll dominate. Okay, well, yeah, duh, right? But it's not always that easy. But how is his wrestling? But, has his striking improved? You go back to Jacare versus Yushin Okami. Go back to Jacare versus Yushin Okami, and you see how smart Jacare is. But the reason I'm bringing this up is, for the most part, the best guys, the ideas of compartmentalizing, boxing and kickboxing and wrestling and jiu-jitsu, that's something that viewers do, and that's something that people who talk about fighting do, but that's not something the best fighters do. The best fighters, it's all one. It's all one. It's all connected. It's all free-flowing from one to the next to the next. It's trained that way. It's thought that way. It's seen that way, and it's expressed that way. That's how they do it. My question is, because we haven't seen how much Jacare has been fighting, Dylan Dennis, I've got some thoughts popping up here on Periscope. Jacare in the past was this brilliant grappler and submission artist who became really good at kickboxing. I just want to know where he's at with the flow of the whole thing together, of blending it all together into one. I don't know the answer to that. And that's what I want to find out. That's what I want to find out in this. I suspect that's the area where he has changed, and that we can no longer say, submission artist with improving striking. He's a free fighter. That's what these guys are. So, of course, he won't. But where will he have the advantage? Of course, if he's on your back, you're in a lot of fucking trouble. I'm swearing a lot today. I apologize. He's on your back, you're in a lot of trouble. He's got your arm, you're in a lot of trouble. He's in the mountain, you're in a lot of trouble. Of course, he spent his life in those places. It's not, how high his grappling score is on, Sherdog or UFC.com or something. It's not about that. It's about a lifetime of comfort in those places and having answers to answers that you think you have, and setting traps for you and tricking you and manipulating. Of course, that's where he's good. But the game that Kelvin plays of in and out, and of playing with range, and of playing with timing, and of playing with drawing, and playing with making you commit and hitting you as you come in, that game is also a game that you can use to make a guy try to shoot in on you. Although when Jacare commits to getting your hips, it's pretty scary. It's a really great fight. One's older, one's younger. One plays at distance, one's a master of submissions. It's going to be really cool. If you're looking for me to make a pick. If you don't know already, I don't do that. I get further and further away from that as time goes on. I want to keep seeing as many different possibilities as possible. Could Kelvin, play with distance and make Jacare overcommit and touch him up and beat him up like he did to Kennedy 18 months ago? Of course he could. Could Jacare, with his hyper-athletic, accelerating through space, get a hold of Kelvin and rip him to the ground early? Of course he could. These are all at play, which is why the fight is so cool. But of the four, so those four 185ers are all in play right now. Then you add Weidman out there. Another in the next day or two, maybe 2 or 3 days, we'll talk about Vitor and Lyoto as well. Kicking around in that same weight range in their 40s, brilliant fighters in their own right. It's an interesting time in that division, and you see some pretty cool martial arts and some pretty cool contests. And this is what I'm really looking forward to, because if Kelvin keeps getting better at this one particular specialization, he's good at everything, he's very athletic, he's smart, he's nice and calm, nice and present in the fights. But this thing that he's specializing in, of playing with where he is compared to where you are, it's a very powerful thing. But that's an area they're all getting better at, including Jacare. And I don't know enough about what Jacare has been doing with very little to assess in the last few years. But I will start looking for every piece I can online to see if there's little insights. But it's going to be a fun one. And I hope you enjoy the hostilities, my friends.